I thank you for joining us here tonight. Soul Journeys Radio on AmericanFreedomRadio.com. We are joined by our special guest tonight, Thomas Sheridan. He is from the land of Ire, an internationally renowned artist, incredible artist, author, satirist, musician, filmmaker, public speaker, and independent researcher. So good to have you back here, Thomas. It's been a while. How are you doing?
Hi, Christie. It's good to be back. Yeah, it's nearly 2 years, amazingly enough.
Yes, time sure flies. You've been busy. Catch us up to date. What have you been doing? You've been traveling all over?
Well, yeah, just amazing. It just has totally exploded for me. When I did your show back in, I think it was summer 2011, nobody knew about me other than through, the art stuff. And now I seem to be... I'm constantly on the radio. I'm getting asked to talk all over the world. I'm getting all kinds of offers, and it's just fantastic. I just didn't expect any of this to happen, and it just is amazing. I just thought that I'd write a book that would just kind of vanish into obscurity, and it's kind of become a cult classic. So basically, the ball is rolling, and I'm very grateful to all the people who supported me. It's been fantastic. And especially yourself. I think that you were the first American radio show I ever did, so it's all come full circle again.
Amazing. That is so great. I mean, I loved your first book. I loved your third book, too. I have not read your second, but you totally deserve it. And, yeah, who knew you'd come on this show and then get invited all over the world and and 3 books now, and you're, getting out there with your art and such, which is absolutely beautiful. I am the proud owner of one of your beautiful pieces of artwork, The Accused, which was totally perfect and appropriate. So I want to thank you again for that. And everything you've done, Thomas, because, you're kind of, when people fall into, learning about psychopaths and such, our information is limited. And it's all very clinical, and, a lot of it you need a thesaurus and a dictionary to understand. And, of course, we know the mainstream thought is, slightly controlled. So I love how you put the information out there that, we can all recognize and relate to in our daily lives. So I just really appreciate that you've been doing that, and congratulations on your success getting out there.
Well, thank you. Well, my idea was that there was nothing out there that was a toolkit to deal with these kind of pathological individuals and these very challenging situations when you were confronted with these individuals. And I said to myself, I'm going to write a book about it, but I don't have to prove that I'm brilliant, or I don't have to prove I'm intelligent, because I am intelligent. The idea of this book is to get out there and prove to people that you can have these skills and have these knowledges, and you don't have to have a PhD to defend yourself. My attitude was that, people needed information quickly. They needed to know about this stuff fast and to save their lives. And yet, if they want to find out about, nucleotide sequences in DNA strands, from 1970s research, they're quite welcome to do that. If they want to learn about psychiatry, psychology, they're quite willing to do, ready to do that. But my attitude is, when your back's against the wall and information, your life is falling apart, or your life has been destroyed by one of these individuals, you need information, practical tools, ASAP. And that was the idea initially behind the videos I made, and then went to the public puzzling people, because people needed information fast on this subject, and that was what amazed me about it, because I used to read all these documents and these books over the years, and I said, how come nobody knows this stuff? This to me is like knowing about nutrition. This is like knowing about, public health and safety. How come we don't know about this? How come it's farmed off into the world of psychiatry and neuroscience, when the whole world is a dysfunctional reflection of these types getting into power? People's personal and social lives are often a dysfunctional reflection of having had encounters with these puzzling people. So I just felt there was a real need for a manual, a toolkit, a means which people could get information to survive one of these experiences, and more importantly, protect themselves going forward.
Definitely. And you did a good job at that. You helped a lot of people kind of pick up the pieces and make sense as to what was happening. Because, a lot of time, I guess I'll just speak for myself. I had no idea that, psychopaths were so prevalent in, the leaders of society, so to speak. And, I think it's normal to meet people that, just are a little maybe, and I don't want to sound judgmental, but sometimes people are a little off and you think, okay, well, that's weird. Next, what's going on here? But a lot of, I found myself in situations where I could make no sense of it at all until I met you and read your book. And I'm like, oh, wow, now I get it. And now, you're actually, as far as your first book, Puzzling People, one of the rules to protect yourself is no contact ever again. But I was probably, programmed by other beliefs where, love everyone and be nice to them anyways, and you can rehabilitate them, and if you're just nice, no one will be able to hurt you. And apparently that was not true. That was a false belief. So I like how you put the information out there, and you did. You gave us immediate practical tools that we can use. So unfortunately, it does seem quite prevalent in society, which you definitely tackled in your latest book, The Anvil of the Psych. So can you tell us about that and what prompted this book?
Well, the first thing before we get to that, the first thing I want to talk about the psychopaths is they're not everywhere. And be very wary of people who see them everywhere and are always pointing them out and always naming them, because that's a witch hunt mentality that exists among a certain type of hysterical individual. Often they can be psychopaths themselves, trying to deflect from their own pathology. Yes. Psychopaths, the very, very most, are 4% in society. And that's 4% across all society. Now, some things like entertainment and politics and finance, you'll get more. Now, there are people today, unfortunately, who will demonstrate psychopathic traits because it's been put into them by the media to act that way. It's almost seemed like to be a maverick, you have to behave like this. They're not generally psychopaths. When you encounter a real psychopath, you know it. You really, really know it. There's something very deep there that's very different than someone who's just a jerk or a difficult person or an obnoxious person. It goes very, very deep, and it's like I always compare it to someone, the term racism is thrown around far too freely these days, but when you meet a real racist, when you meet that real racist individual, boy, do you know it. You can feel the hatred in their heart emanating from inside them. It's the same thing with the psychopath. The genuine article, if you come into contact with one, you absolutely know it. So my attitude is don't live in fear. Don't be going around thinking he's a psychopath, she's a psychopath. And don't be falling into the trap that all the problems you ever had in your life or all the relationships that you've ever had that failed was because the other side was a psychopath. I mean, I know people, especially, who told me this, all my exes were psychopaths. No, they weren't. Maybe it's time to start looking at yourself, that kind of. So it's, people have to be mature, they have to be adult about it. But having said that, they still exist, the psychopath. They're out there, and unfortunately, they're clustered at the top of the pyramid in terms of power. So we've got to be very careful about this stuff. Most times, a creep is just a creep. And just because someone is eccentric or weird, it's very easy to alter the paradigms of evil to say somebody is a psychopath because they might have a different viewpoint or a different outlook on life, or because they might have a different sexual persuasion, or even anything like that. No, that's not what a psychopath is. That's just, most of my friends in real life are eccentrics. They're artists, they're musicians. They're what, like if I brought my friends to some town in the Bible Belt in the U.S., they would freak out. But they're the nicest people in the world. That kind of a thing. They're just all, they're living unusual lifestyles, or they're alternative people in music and art and stuff like that. That's just the kind of people I'm attracted to. It depends on your reference point. So people have to be very, very careful about that stuff. Now, secondly...
Yeah, very good point. I'm glad you brought that up, because, yeah, it is true. It's like, everyone's a psychopath. That's not true either. But you did, I think it was on your website or in one of your books, you listed some of the professions that they tend to cling to.
Yeah, Professor Kevin Durant is an evolutionary psychologist in London, wrote a book called The Wisdom of Psychopaths. Very good book, actually. And he talks about, although it's kind of depressing in some ways, because it's like he basically shows that they are at the top of the fields, but it's still an important book in terms of the study. And he talks about like some of the professions, and it's like surgeons, journalists, religious leader, that kind of thing towards the top. And the people least likely to be psychopaths are things like artists and creative people and so on, which totally makes sense to me from my life. I don't think I've ever met an artist, someone like a visual artist who was a psychopath. I've met them in the music business, but generally they weren't very good musicians or anything. They tend to be promoters and agents and things like that. So it's an interesting thing. I thought that book was very good. It's well worth a read if someone wants to check it out. And I've got the list of the professions that he evaluated in this research on my website. But yeah, it's interesting how, well, they cluster into anything that gives them a sense of power and feeds their godlike hubris. So that's why I was surprised politician wasn't at the top, but then I realized that most of the politicians in the world are either ex-corporate men or they're ex-lawyers, which was scored very high at the top. So that would cover it. So it's an interesting thing, all right, that it's gone so mainstream. That's what I find interesting. It's gone so mainstream, and I'm glad finally the dialogue about this is out there, and it's not under the ownership of people who talk about aliens and things like that anymore. It's now out there, or even in the it's out there being talked about by people in the mainstream, and it's a good dialogue to have because it's an important one, because it's a fact of life we have to live with, and we have to, as a society, find a way to deal with them and work around them. But we're not going to do it on a social, grandiose kind of like macro level. We have to do it in our own lives. If we have a person who's like that, we have to get them out of our lives and have nothing to do with them. My idea is that if we all did that, they'd be left as like toothless sharks swimming around in the ocean, and that's the ideal situation.
Yeah, very well said. Okay, so that's really interesting. I mean, I guess here we are in media, and that seems to be one of the professions that they tend to gravitate towards. So I guess that kind of makes sense in regards to your latest book, how you describe the lords of perception. So let's get into that. What prompted this latest book?
Well, this is something that I've been interested in for years, because I used to work as a graphic designer and a communications consultant for many corporations, and I was actually schooled in the art of actually making people making people, lazy in terms of their perceptions, where you could actually present them with information that was so-so or wasn't so, or was even bad information, but deliver it in such a way through a graphical and a worded manner that they would actually think things were great. Or they would just, because human beings are funny that way. Human beings do not like bad news. Even when it's bad news that might save their life, especially modern human beings, we'd rather have the feel-good, happy Hallmark moment, situation in our lives where it's going to be okay in the end, even when it's not. This book kind of came out of the work of my two previous books on psychopathology, in that basically many of the concepts that psychopaths and the method psychopaths use in their private life, things like gaslighting, where they change people's concept of reality, love bombing, where they flatter people to the point where they'll believe anything that the psychopath tells them, and they'll fall under their spell. Well, these same techniques have been brought into marketing, advertising, and even politics, particularly political spin, in order to win you over. And I came up with this idea of, well, who's behind all this? Well, you could say the marketers, the advertisers, the PR people, the consultants. So I gave one term, I use the term the lords of perception, as the people in all these professions who literally change our sense of perception to make us believe things that are not necessarily as they really are. Well, people sit down with their families and their friends and they say things like, oh, I'm a Democrat or I'm a Republican, I'm a conservative, I'm a socialist, I'm a liberal, whatever. And they don't realize that these labels are as artificial as any other product. Just like their religion, just like anything they've been raised with. These are labels and these are badges and these are identities that are not necessarily cultivated from within their own consciousness in terms of applying their own belief, well, I would say their own morality construct or anything else directly towards it. They just were given an indoctrination and they assigned themselves to it. Now, that's not to say these people are dishonest or they're being phony or they're being shallow. What it really says is that people are constantly being limited within their own perceptions and their own worldview to believe something that about themselves that's literally a design that they've been told to slot into, that their beliefs and their notions about life, their assumptions, even their passions, even things they're deeply passionate about, they will defend these things to the death, and yet these things, these symbols, these motifs, these conceptual ideas are purely artificial made creations that they're handed to them and said, this is what you are and this is what you believe. And according to the person, they will choose from these beliefs, but 9 times out of 10, maybe 99 times out of 100, they will go for the package deal and say, I'm a conservative and I believe everything conservatives believe. I'm a liberal and I believe everything the liberals believe. And yet they're not really individually thinking. They're just applying a badge to themselves, and this badge has been created for them by these lords of perception for them to believe in.
Okay, so where do they get their drive to alter our perception?
It begins in school. It begins with the education system. What happens is when you see, it's a very good way to study this is to see how children's art develops when they're young. When a child, before they go into school, are very, very creative artists. They observe and, portray the world through their drawings, their crayon drawings, in a very unique and a very beautiful way. They do not express things in literal absolutist terms. When they want to draw a picture of a house, the house can be drawn in any color, any shape, and may not even be the shape of a house. This is because both the left and the right hemispheres of their brain are operating in balance, in sync, like we should do. And generally the children will portray artistically how they feel inside rather than to apply a sort of a schematic idea of what something should look like in real life. Then they go to school, and the first thing they learn in school is that they have to count, and they have to learn how to apply processes. And the idea of a process is a methodology of something being like something or being like a specific shape. And then the children start drawing houses. They start drawing them like trying to draw a house with a little sloped roof and a chimney, and suddenly the magic has gone out of it. The same thing happens with when they try to draw a car, or even their mother. They may draw their mother or their father as almost like a kind of a beautiful shape, coloured shape, and then they come out and they have a matchstick man figure of a kind of a circle and a few squidgy lines with some hair and a smile on the face of it, and that now becomes mummy. So automatically the concept of mother has been taken from a sort of an emotional left-right brain balanced way and pinned into the material world as a graphic, as a logo. And this is because now their left brain is now dominant through the education system and is now bullying the child to bullying the right brain to draw a better mother or draw a better father or a better house. And then what happens is, because the child cannot express the visual idea of what they want to express in terms of realistic pictures, the left brain says to the right brain, you're no good at art, you're no good at creativity, so start learning math, start learning reading, start learning all processes, start getting used to, timetables in school and classes and fixed times and fixed hours, and the next thing you know, the child is, all of us are completely left brain dominated, and this makes us very, very susceptible to exterior control systems, because the left brain is like, it almost has Asperger's. It's great at following orders, it's great at, applying processes, it's great at logical, analytical applications of experiences, but these things are ultimately dependent upon a authority figure, on a control system, on a methodology and a process, and that's when it begins, because for the rest of our lives we're told, here's the process, here's the methodology, here's the product, here's the dogma, and you spend the rest of your life applying these ideas to yourself, because your right brain has literally been smothered, and you cannot see things in an abstract or even in a sort of a holistic way, and it takes many years to undo this.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. We are in a very left-brain society where we're taught to doubt everything we do. In fact, somebody on the chat just shared that when her brother was in elementary school, he painted a purple cow, and his teacher actually told their mother that he shouldn't be making purple cows.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. No, you shouldn't do that art. You're not allowed to perceive things this way. It has to be exactly that way. Follow the leader, everyone.
Well, that's, and also this is imposing perception upon us.
Yeah.
Is there really a purple cow, or is there a black and white cow? You understand? A lot of this stuff is to do, a lot of our perception is based on the idea that this is what things look like. And when if you have a sort of a psychedelic experience, you realize very quickly that the world is not as rigid or as black and white or as stable as what they tell you it is.
Yeah, definitely.
So that's also imposing a perception on the child. We don't know for a fact when that little kid was in school if he was actually seeing purple cows.
Yeah? And maybe purple cows do exist.
Well, there's no reason why they wouldn't. It's just perception. It's just a subjective observation of the electromagnetic spectrum. That's all our perception is. And if you can get in there and tune the frequency to make you perceive things according to a control system, then you will see things according to the control system. There's very good stories of indigenous people who were showing artwork of European paintings and drawings that were very accurate, and they looked at them and they couldn't make any sense to them. They're just spludges. It wasn't until they took a while for them to explain, this is an eye, this is a mouth, this is the hair, and they started to see the person in the painting. The same thing when they would show them a drawing of a ship. They would look out to sea and see the ship, and then they would show them the drawing of the Spanish galleon, and the Spaniards would say, this is the sail, and this is the hull, and this is the ship in the water, and then it would take them a while for them to actually see that. So perception is completely subjective. It's a sort of a prejudice is imposed upon the viewer to observe things according to how they've been programmed to observe them. This is why when you meet a person at first, it may not be very attractive to them physically, and then you start to, because they may not look like what the state-sanctioned corporate idea of what beautiful is, and then you start talking to them, and their spirit, their soul starts coming true, and the next thing you know, you say, I never realized how beautiful she is. She really is beautiful. And that's the same thing. The perception, the prejudiced perception, the programming that a beauty is only a certain way someone looks is dissolved by getting straight to their subconscious and bonding with them at a very deep subconscious level. And then you realize the whole idea of what beauty is completely a construct.
Wow. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Now, let me ask you this, because apparently a couple comments after the last one I read to you about the purple elephant, this person today is actually stuck in a cult that they actually use artwork. So it's really interesting that I guess maybe him being criticized at a young age led him to accept the control of these other people. I don't really know, any details about it, but they do. I don't know. Well, I guess they produce the art and such for other people. So, they're asking, why do some people see the light and others get squished and locked into that programming?
Well, I find that there's a crisis crunch happens in people's lives. Something happens, the loss of a loved one, a nervous breakdown, the loss of a child, a relationship that falls apart, or just something really traumatic happens. And this trauma very often shifts a person's perception. It's like you're tuned into this one radio station or TV station all your life, and then something comes along out of the blue, and it throws you off track, something you did not expect, puts you into a deep state of emotional and psychological trauma, and then you start to see that reality is flexible, and you start to perceive things in a very different way. It also happens as you age. Young people are very literate, especially young men. They see things in a very black and white absolutist stage. This is why cults go for people in their 20s, straight out of college, usually quite bright people. This is why the likes of Hitler and Stalin and Mao went for the youth, went for the young people, because they're very, very black and white, and they can be very idealistic at these ages, and they're very easy to program at those ages. But these people, something will happen to them, and it will often shock them out of it. And it also happens with age. As you age, you start to see that the world is not as black and white, and your perceptions change. There was a very good study there done in England last year where they were asking old people who were in the hospice, people who were dying of cancer or terminal illnesses or just dying of old age, and they asked them what was the thing they regret the most. And after saying they wish they spent more time with their friends and family, the number 2 one was that they wish they didn't follow rules.
Okay. Wow. So, I mean, it's really sad because non-psychopaths seem to get caught up into this. Do we just kind of get addicted to that control or being told what to do, or is there maybe something inside ourselves that just gives up? They don't want to go against the grain anymore because, the training, Pavlov's dogs, or, anything else. There was this, I don't remember the one experiment or when it was conducted, but the dogs were in a cage and they were being electrocuted, and they would electrocute one side at a time. So eventually the dog would learn not to go to the left side or then not to go to the right side. Then eventually they actually opened up the door to the cage and the dogs wouldn't move at all. They were completely lifeless. So what is this within ourselves that allows us to continue with that self-destruction, under the wrath of these psychopaths?
Well, in the late Victorian era, late 19th century, early 20th century was a time of enormous change in terms of psychology and behaviorism. In fact, the whole behaviorism movement came out of that period. The idea was that, like, behaviorists like Watson believed that human beings were just DNA robots. Well, they didn't have DNA, they didn't know about DNA back then, but they knew about genetics, and they knew that people were just basically robots. This is how they viewed human beings and animals. There was no self. There was no self-will. There was nothing inside there. We were just robots who respond to external stimuli. This is purely what we are. We have no free will as such. Now, this was quite a horrible thing that they were promoting because it actually led to quite horrific human rights violations during the 20th century. But the idea was, through Pavlov, through Watson, through behaviorism, through conditioning, that the idea was a human being who had no free will. We only responded to stimuli. Now, the fatal mistake they made there was that they forgot about the complexity of a human being. A human being is not a robot. A human being is, even a child, is an extremely complex organism. They never really factored in things like our spiritual dimension or things like our artistic or our creative dimension. And this is why behaviorism and Pavlovian conditioning ultimately failed, and why it will continue to fail. But they still tried. It went from this scientific idea, this Darwinian idea, that we were robots and could become programmed. And they realized very quickly it wasn't going to work that way. And then, along came Sigmund Freud and his nephew Edward Bernays, who discovered that the best way to control us was to play on our insecurities.
Oh, definitely. And control the information. Okay, I'm sure there's a lot more we can talk about in regards to that topic, but let's get to our caller. Looks like Sharon, area code 320. Welcome to the show.
Well, hi.
Hi there, dear. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing good.
You wrote the comment in the chat, right?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
Okay. Well, tell us more.
Well, I was in a cult, and basically for, I'd say, 13 years of my youth, I was pretty much brainwashed slowly and systematically, along with the rest of my family. But since, late age 11. But my question is, it's like once you're out and you are working on deprogramming what was just pretty much crammed down your throat for so many years, how do you get past like the post-traumatic stress of it, or is there a way you can? Because it just seems like it keeps coming back no matter how much I understand what had happened, and that I'm okay now, and life is cool.
Well, Alex, first of all, congratulations, Shannon, for getting out and deprogramming. You deserve tremendous credit for that. That's wonderful. You're on the right path. Mm-hmm. You have to understand what's been done to you. You've literally had your brain. Anyone who's a member of a cult, they've literally had their brain removed from their head. I'm talking metaphorically. And the brain of the cult leader replaced in there, and you're turned into kind of a pathological automaton. It's not your fault now. It's not your fault. Yeah. A pathological automaton controlled by the leader. It's the Borg mind situation. And it's so powerful that people under cult mind control will go to extraordinary lengths to say, excuse me, I'm not in a cult. And then they will behave and act exactly as a cult member would behave. That's how detached from their own reality they are. Now, how this happens is literally your brain has been rewired by the cult leader or by the cult system. The synapses and the neural pathways in your brain, and particularly the epigenetic strands within those brains, have been changed to actually make you. Now, you're not now. Don't think you're like this, but you were a robot who was programmed by the cult leader. The cult leader would nearly always be I've yet to meet a cult leader who isn't a psychopath. Put it that way, because no normal person has the need to control other people that way. They can do it just through their personality or being a good person. A psychopath does it in a cult through intimidation, through smear campaignings, following the love bombing, and through indoctrination. Constantly repetition and creating an us and them mindset where everyone outside the cult is a danger to the rest of us, and the only chance of survival is you being in the cult. And this is what causes the brain damage. Now, I don't mean you're mentally ill, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with you as a person, but you have been damaged.
I thought I was insane for many years, I was almost schizophrenic or something.
Well, let me tell you something about cult. There's a great misconception that people who join cults have something wrong with them. That's not true at all. They're often very bright people. In fact, many of these sort of flying saucer mind control cults that started in the 60s, they were actually created by groups like the CIA and DARPA. And the reason for that was these flying saucer cults, they got a big fright back in the 60s when people like Malcolm X came along, and they didn't expect that. So what they did was they created all these cults that operated around Silicon Valley and places like Caltech and Berkeley and Harvard and all the top MIT and all the top universities in America. They never wanted another intelligent, smart person ever again challenging the system. So what they did was they created these flying saucer cults, and what these flying saucer cults did was actually channel the great minds and the great thinkers of the future, and instead of having them challenging the system and becoming powerful leaders in politics, they'd be sitting there talking to aliens and things like that. This is what they would do to them. This was a system created to destroy any kind of populist uprising from intelligent people, particularly in the university system following the Vietnam War. So that's a myth that like stupid or crazy people join cults, it's often the other way round, because these people are so left brain dominated, they're easy to program. Now, the thing with you and the post-traumatic stress disorder thing here, you got to look at it this way. You're coming out of a bad relationship, okay? It's the same kind of idea. It's a horrible, rotten relationship that has polluted your mind, and you now have to get yourself together. The post-traumatic stress injury, I never call it disorder. It's not a disorder. You've been injured. You've been injured by the cult leader, or someone has been injured by the psychopath in the relationship. There are ways, the methods to deal with them are very similar to the methods to deal with someone coming out of a war situation, or someone who was a prisoner, or someone who was a hostage in someone who was kidnapped. You've got to start rewiring your brain back to the way it should be. There's still parts of your brain that are still, unfortunately, remnants of the treatment that you went through. A good way of doing this would be to keep journals. And you have to keep these journals in such a way that they have to put through affirmations of yourself as a person. So you must write down things that are positive about yourself and good about yourself. But also, Sharon, this is important, the things that you hated about the cult and what they did to you, you have to purge them out as well. And it's when you're doing this in your journals, draw little pictures, draw little designs. You must activate both your left and your right brain. And when you're purging this stuff out of you, you will find that it will start changing the chemical system, the chemical physiology of your brain, and you'll have less stress hormones, less adrenaline, less norepinephrine from your lower brainstem, and you will start to have a chemical balance within your brain, because ultimately that's what's causing the stress. So don't give up on that, and don't be punishing yourself for finding yourself in this situation. It wasn't your fault. The best thing to do now is to take control of your own life and see the situation for what it is. If you get my second book, Defeat the Demons, there's a whole section in the back with dealing with post-traumatic stress injury following a pathological relationship, and it'll probably help you a lot.
Sure. I've got one more question. Speaking of the right and the left brain, the tool that she used on us, I was an artist, so I pretty much had to be like a slave artist for her. Would that have any unique effects if she preyed on my very strong right brain side?
Well, it would depend on what the artwork was or anything like that. I can't say for sure. But yeah, see, because you're an artist, she was attacking you in your subconscious creative mind. They know how to get you. They know how to target people. They knew you were artistic and they knew you were creative. And this is why they attacked that aspect of your personality. You have to now start creating your art for yourself and not for her. And that way you will find liberation. Your artistic vision, not the one that was imposed upon you.
Yep. Okay. Awesome.
And Sharon is an absolutely brilliant artist herself. So, yeah, it looks like you guys have a little bit in common. Sharon, what's your website?
What is it? It's so new. Let me think here.
Just type in the chat.
Fine-tuned art.
Fine-tuned art. Yeah, very beautiful. And congratulations to you for being able to break away from that and being so strong and just being, an inspiration for the rest of us. So I appreciate you calling in. And very well said, Thomas. But it is that time. We have to take another break. So hang on, everyone. We will be right back with Thomas Sheridan here on SoulJourneysRadio.com. And I just want to say that was an awesome call. Sharon, thank you so much. You deserve a medal, and that was incredibly brave of you to share your personal journey with us here on the show. And Thomas, excellent and very wise and healing words. I love how you post-traumatic stress disorder, we hear about that a lot. And I love how you likened it. It's not a disorder. It's not something that a medication is going to save us from, because when you really look at it, it's the psychopaths giving us that information. So it's not a disorder, it's an injury. I love how you stated that so eloquently.
Yeah, well, it's like being punched in the teeth by somebody. Losing your teeth wasn't a disorder. They were knocked out of your skull by your skull. The exact same thing with post-traumatic stress.
Yeah, definitely. So what are, gosh, I totally agree with that. So what are some of the masks that the psychopaths use to gain control over us?
Well, I'll give you one that would be applicable to what Shannon was talking about. Initially, they will identify you as a target. If they see you have something they need, you've got money, you've got status, you're good looking, you could be used for some reason, you could be just basically even some for social status, sexual, or just somebody that they're interested for some reason. The first thing that will come in, after they've evaluated you at a distance, after they've observed you, they're tremendous students of human behavior. After they've watched you, they learn about you as much as you can through their social networking. They'll friend you on Facebook. They'll try to find out everything about you, and then they will come in acting as if you knew them all their lives. You'll be like amazed how similar they are like you. And that's not because they are like you. That's because they've custom tailor-made a personality or in reality a persona designed to work you specifically. This will be coupled with love bombing. Love bombing was developed by Margaret Singer in her book Cults and Their Myths. Synchronicity there, and she found that love bombing was what love bombing does. It fires up large amounts of dopamine in the brain. Dopamine makes you feel happy, makes you feel good, makes you feel relaxed. It's a highly addictive hormone, and as you're constantly flattered and told you're wonderful, especially in a relationship if there's lots of like romance and sex going on, the dopamine is flying. And then what the psychopath does is they take the love away, and you have a dopamine crash. And you're literally a junkie in search of a fix, and you will do anything to get that feeling back again. You'll have people saying, "Oh, I married him. Before we were married, he was absolutely Mr. Perfect. It was like he swept me off my feet, and the minute the ring was on the finger, he completely changed. And I was in a sort of a shattered state. I couldn't understand where had this amazing love and romance gone to." And that's because they probably married a psychopath, and he didn't need to play the great lover anymore, and suddenly that person was crashing and then needing a fix of dopamine. Now, what does a junkie do? What does a heroin addict or a crack addict do when they run out of drugs and they need another fix? Well, the answer is they'll do absolutely anything, and the same thing applies with somebody who's been love bombed and the love has been taken away. To get that dopamine, that rush, that feeling of happiness back, they will literally do anything. And then at that moment on, you are a prisoner of the psychopath's will. What the psychopath wants you to do, you will start doing it. Even things you said to yourself, "I would have never done anything like this in my life." The psychopath will make you do it in the hope that you get that feeling back of love again, so you can get that dopamine back again.
Okay. All right. So love bombing is a common technique, and you mentioned they'll kind of watch you for a while when they pick their target and then make friends with you and then pretend that you have like everything in common, right?
Yeah.
And that's just because they have your dossier, so to speak. So how do they choose the targets? Because I know myself. I'm just a regular person. I have no particular special talent. I certainly don't have any money or anything like that. So what are some of the weaknesses that they'll prey on to select a new target?
Well, a very common thing I hear back from people who have been targeted is that the psychopath will play a sort of a missing archetype within the target's life. So a woman who grew up with no father, or an abusive father, or a poor father figure, the psychopath male will become the daddy. You understand? They will not only be a lover, but they'll also be the father figure too. They'll become the archetypal father figure that they will figure that person never had growing up. So they will actually play that role. So not only is this woman getting a lover, but she's also getting the father that never came home, or the daddy that was never there. Same thing happens with the female psychopath. The female psychopath will figure out that this guy, his mother didn't really take care of him, or she was an alcoholic or something, and she will be the lover/mother archetype. And again, he's feeling not only sensations of being in love with a woman, but he's also feeling the sensation of having a motherly, maternal figure in his life that he never had before. And this is a very, very dangerous weapon, because when you play these two angles of attack on a vulnerable and sensitive person, you can actually control them very, very quickly and make them a slave in no time.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So it's not just people's strengths that they prey on. It might be their weaknesses, broken families or people.
It's always their weaknesses. Yeah, they will try to fill. They will attempt to fill in the ghosts of the person's soul that are not there. They'll prey on their weaknesses with the intention of capitalizing on their strengths.
Okay. That makes sense. Yeah. All right. Okay, now, the love bombing thing, that's a technique used quite a bit. Like the people, you first meet that are like, oh, hey, I love you so much, my goddess, or God, or my brother, or, depending on who they're speaking to, the ones that you instantly meet and pretend that they love you. All of a sudden, is that something that, maybe one of the signs that we should look for?
Yeah, they wouldn't always, actually, a lot of those people wouldn't be psychopaths, they'd be just phonies. But you will get the psychopath doing it, but not so overtly. They're not overt about it. They're subtle about it. They're very devious, and they'll do it in a very subtle way. They wouldn't, they don't generally make a performance at first. The performance will be slipped in slowly as they learn more and more about you. That's why when people often remark, when they first went on a date with the psychopath tend to be very quiet and just sat there smiling. What the psychopath is doing is looking for all the cues and triggers in a person, watching their eye movements, watching to see if there's any insecurity, and very common, making very close eye-on contact. And when they would say things, they would look at people's pupils to see if the pupils were dilating. When a woman's pupils are dilating, that means she's hearing something from a man. Or if she's a lesbian, from a woman, that's actually really making her feel relaxed and is actually getting to her subconscious mind. The psychopath knows these things, and the psychopath generally, when they're trying to move in on somebody, makes very close and intense eye contact. What they're doing then is they're seeing. The British Journal of Optometry did a fantastic research on this in 2010, where they showed that a psychopath's stare, that intense stare of the psychopath, is more akin to an animal in a predatory mode, like a tiger waiting to pounce on a prey, or a lizard about to catch a bug. It's the exact same kind of stare, and the reason why they have this stare is they're looking for fear, because they're looking for fear and reward. They're studying people at the sort of subconscious level. And why they stare like that with their eyes very wide open is because of norepinephrine in their lower brainstem. It shoots up from the oral complex in the lower brainstem, and it actually floods around the optical cortex, which is in the back of the brain, and this is what causes their eyes to open up wide when they're staring, when they're in predatory mode. That's a very good way to spot a psychopath, is that when they can actually, when they're really hitting on you in the love bombing way, the eyes are quite open and the stare is very intense. Now, another thing I have to say, there are people who have intense sort of stare eyes, and they're not psychopaths. I have a friend who's like that. He has classic psychopath eyes. He even jokes about it himself and laughs about it. But what happened to him was, when he was 19, he fell off a motorcycle and he banged the back of his head. So that has caused his eyes to be very kind of bug-eyed. But so you shouldn't judge just on those eyes. You have to sort of examine this person, the love bombing, the behavior, if they're very schmoozy, very schmaltzy, if they're very passive aggressive, all these kinds of things. Then you start building a picture that maybe I'm dealing with a psychopath. In my first book, Puzzling People, that's the idea of it. I give you all the things to look for in a very simple form, and then you start to build a jigsaw puzzle of whether you're dealing with a psychopath or not. But the one thing to look out for is that predatory stare, because when you see it, by God, you know it.
Yeah, it's biting for sure. Now, someone's asking on the chat, does the psychopath know these things instinctively, or do they study them, obtain some form of training, or, maybe study psychology or whatever to be more effective in their craft?
They learn it as they're growing up as kids. As they're growing up as kids, they realise they're different than other children. They don't know why kids cry, or why kids are upset when their pets die, or why a child is upset when his parents or a friend dies. They don't get that. And they start to understand that other children have these kinds of deep emotions that they don't have. And they start observing them. Remember, if you don't have the kind of emotional sort of turmoil that many young people and teenagers have, this puts you in a position to observe and look at the ones who do. And then you can observe them and realize that there's ways you can actually change their physiology, or even their actual behavior, by responding to these stimuli. So the psychopath grows up knowing they're different, but also spends their time observing all the things in people that they don't experience in order to capitalize on it. So it's almost like a kind of a basic training they all embark on, usually just before puberty.
Okay, so now, all right, just before puberty, are you saying that psychopaths are developed, or are they born?
Well, I believe they're born, that there's more and more evidence of this. The New York Times had a story last year about a special school in Florida, where they identified psychopathic preteens, and they put these kids in this school. It's part of a research program to study them. All these kids came from good homes, and none of their siblings had the same traits. So there you go. The psychopath seems to come out of nowhere, almost like an alien creature or something that manifests in a family. And these children all behave the same and all act the same and all had the same psychopathic traits, almost like they were robots, and like they were born that way. And they found that they very little things, they would see that the kids, as they came from like preteens, I'm talking about like 5 and 6, 7, these kids were identified very young, because they probably did horrific things when they were kids, like killed lots of animals and stuff in the house and things like that, or just were not responding emotionally to anything. And they discovered that the kids would watch and observe each other and other children to learn things. So it's a very spooky thing. It's almost like something arrived in here from another world, another dimension, and then start studying human beings so they can live and prey among them. It literally is like that. Is it genetic? Well, there's no hard proof it yet, and any kind of science that seems to prove it, or tries to prove it, seems to come out of like the 70s and 80s. It's not like cutting-edge genetics. And another thing, too, as well, is that there's tremendous evidence that the psychopathic child just comes out of nowhere. Also, I was talking to a nurse in Norway when I was on tour speaking to her there, and she was a maternity nurse, and she said every so often you would pick up a baby in the maternity ward that just didn't feel right. There was something not right there. And one of these children she picked up years ago was the son of a woman she knew in the same town in Norway. And she said that kid grew up to be an absolute total psychopath. So it was almost like she could tell instinctively that something was different about this baby when it was born. It had a different energetic resonance or something.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not a professional, but I haven't seen any evidence in any of my lifetime experience that it's genetic. It appears that, with people I know, that are within the same families, the children are raised the exact same upbringing, and one is normal and, kind and would never do harm to anyone, and the other one, it's just kind of how they were born, it almost seems like.
Yes. There's a vast growing body of evidence to prove that now. The genetic thing is just not been proven. It's all wishful thinking based on the idea. Actually, what happened was with the genome. The Genome Project was supposed to, this enormous sort of like biotech program that started in the late 80s, was supposed to catalog the entire genotype of the human gene DNA sequence, the whole nucleotide sequence, the whole way down the line, so every personality trait could be identified within the genetic structure. And this was the great hope of genetics and the genome. Well, what they discovered was that the hereditary factor in terms of personality does not exist.
that's just an easy way for them to gloss over, what's really going on. For instance, I am a holistic health coach, and people will come to me and say, well, I have heart disease and diabetes because, my parents did. And, the truth is you didn't inherit the disease. What you inherited was the habits. So if you grow up on, say, McDonald's every day, well, duh. Of course you're going to have heart disease and diabetes. So, all of these things are changeable. And I think you shared with me something during the break, another experiment they did about some disease. Can you share that here with us?
Yeah, I cover it in detail in my second book, Defeated Demons. Essentially, 2 children were studied at Chicago General Hospital, and both of these kids were supposed to have this rare hereditary disease that was genetic. One of the kids didn't know they had the disease, and the family didn't know the family had the disease, and the kid didn't get it. So the belief now is that epigenetics, you actually switch on these genes that may cause these diseases to happen. And the Genome Project itself is, the ultimate sign of its failure, of its complete failure, is all this biotech money that was invested in it has all been removed from it. And biotech corporations are no longer investing in the Genome Project for the simple reason is they discovered that the genes are not that important.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. And
I've always followed the money. If big business is no longer investing in something, it's not working. They're not going to waste their money on something that's no use to them. It's literally only public money is now being wasted on this Genome Project, which has proven one thing and one thing only: the hereditable factor doesn't exist.
Okay. Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I also believe that we can change our DNA at any time we choose to. But that's probably another show. Let me ask you this, Thomas. Somebody on the chat said that they almost became a psychopath. What are your thoughts on that? Is that a choice? Can we decide, I want to be a psychopath when I grow up? Or can you notice some of the signs and then say, I don't want to be this way, I'm going to be a good person? Is this possible?
Well, it's a thing I call proto psychopaths, right? A proto psychopath is someone who's not a psychopath, but for one reason or another ends up becoming and behaving just like one. People who are members of cults are all proto psychopathic. They lose their ability for human decency. They lose their ability to have empathy for people outside the cult because the cult leader programs to be them like this. The same thing can happen with someone in a street gang. Like, I've known people. I grew up in a tough area in the north side of Dublin, so I've had friends who were in gangs and drug dealers and stuff. And these guys, at their very core, were actually decent people. Yeah. The problem was that because in order to survive, or they came from bad families and they had a really bad drug problem, they behaved with almost psychopathic tendencies. But they still wouldn't feel right about the bad things they did. We've all done things in our life we're ashamed of. We've all done things in our lives we shouldn't have done. The difference between us and the psychopath is we actually give a damn enough to know that we've hurt these people or we've done these things that were wrong or immoral, and we try to make amends, if not directly to the person we hurt, to society as a whole, to almost atone at some level for the guilt and shame we feel of the hurt we caused others. A psychopath will feel no guilt or shame. They won't even understand why you should. To them, it's just business. If they want something, they'll do anything to take it, to get it, including killing a person. It would mean nothing to them. And another thing I should say to people, if someone is concerned that they might be a psychopath, I've got news for you, they're not. Because a psychopath doesn't care that they're a psychopath. It doesn't bother them. They would not be concerned about it. They just get on with their lives and just prey on others. So don't fall into the trap that you think you're turning into a psychopath. You either are or you are not. You may have things in your life you've done that you're ashamed of, but that's called being a human being. And what you have to do is learn from the mistakes and atone for the hurt and damage you may have caused others, and very importantly, for the hurt and damage you have done to yourself.
Okay. All right. So you either are or you aren't. Now, of the ones that are, let's say, how many of them have actually been diagnosed by the system as such? And, the other side of that, how many people are misdiagnosed as such?
Very good question. I would say almost none of them have been officially diagnosed. It's very rare, unless they commit a crime or they offer themselves up for a research program to put themselves under a CAT scan or an fMRI, and they do the full diagnostic testing. Almost nobody has been diagnosed as a psychopath unless they've been a criminal. This is why it's such a badly studied field of research, is because nearly all the research has been done on criminals in prisons. So it's a very inaccurate field of study. We've never had an across-the-board study on psychopathology. Many of the people, vast majority of psychopaths are not violent. They're psychologically violent, but they're not physically violent. There's just too much trouble for them. A lot of them would be very coward. A lot of them are very cowardly as well. They'll attack through smear campaigns. A smear campaign is the trademark of a psychopath. A normal person doesn't embark on smear campaigns. They may be pissed off at someone, and they'll probably lash out at them, and that's the end of it. Only a psychopath embarks on smear campaigns, because that's a way from distracting for themselves. So that's how they're violent. I forget the point. I forget the question. What was the question again?
Well, I was just, obviously no, studies could possibly be done this way, but it was just about how many people that are diagnosed as psychopaths really are, and then how many have been misdiagnosed. Oh, yes. But given what we're learning here, it seems like, a lot of the big psychopaths, of course, running governments, etc., they're not going to end up in jail and be able to, go through those sort of treatments, yet, somebody born on, say, the east side of any city, planet Earth, has a tough upbringing, maybe, gets into drugs or whatever and commits, petty crimes and goes to prison. They'll be told they're a psychopath, and then they might actually believe it. But it's really not so. They were just someone having hard times, and then, you read all the psychological literature. I mean, look at everything they put out there. Technically, any of us can read the checklist. Do you feel restless sometimes? Well, yeah. Do you get mad sometimes? Well, yeah. Well, oh, great. I'm a psychopath, or whatever. I'm bipolar.
That's why I know. Do not pay attention to the diagnostics and statistic manuals of the American Psychiatric Association, because they essentially declare everyone on Earth insane or dangerous at some level, and we all need to be medicated. But one that really gets on my goat is borderline personality disorder. Borderline personality disorder is applied to two types of people. One, mainly, it's women who just have emotional problems, who may be very highly strung, very flighty, have wild mood swings, and they're stigmatized with this borderline personality. That's the first bunch. I just think they're just normal people who they're probably just all over the place, and they just need a sort of a stability in their lives, and they shouldn't be stigmatized with this thing called borderline personality disorder. But more frighteningly is generally female and gay psychopaths are often diagnosed as being borderline personality disorders, and that allows these psychopaths, these female psychopaths and these homosexual psychopaths, to then prey in society as having a disease or a sickness, when in reality they're full-blown psychopaths. And it often allows them, particularly the female ones, to get off in court after doing the most appalling acts. They can actually declare themselves to be borderlines, and therefore they're sick and they're not responsible for their behavior. A classic example of that was a woman down in Florida called Quinn Gray. I still find this story amazing. In 2009, her and her boyfriend staged a phony kidnap where she told her husband and kids and her mother that she'd be murdered if a ransom money wasn't given over. The poor husband and the kids and the wife and the parents and all the family were in deep terror, believing that this woman had been kidnapped. She faked the whole thing. It was just a scam to get some money. And then she was on the husband and her on TV, and the poor husband is sitting there saying, "Oh, I stand by my wife because she has borderline personality. She's an unwell woman." And there she is next to him with the smirk on her face, knowing she got away with it.
Yeah. Oh, goodness. Okay, yeah, all right, so I guess we'll never really know who has been misdiagnosed and how many there really are, but I'd like to get back to, you said some of the signs and things that they do. You mentioned slander campaigns. I definitely have been on the receiving end of that, so I recognize that very well. And when we were talking about the love bombing, you mentioned some of the techniques they use there. So let's say we go on a date with a psychopath. And, the love bombing is working, and we fall for it temporarily. Maybe we just had a rough breakup or, someone just died or something. So we're emotionally maybe a little unstable. What is the next step in their performance?
They'll try to establish a relationship very, very quickly. They'll want to move in with you. They'll want to get married, or they want to get engaged, or they want to own property or have children right away. You'll be swept off of your feet at the speed of the relationship. Psychopathic relationships, they move like that. Not just the romantic
microwave relationships.
Yeah. Not just the romantic ones, even the ones where they're trying to get money off you, a business kind of thing. Quick, we got to move now, we got to do now, fast. Everything is very, very fast. And you can't think straight because they don't want you thinking straight. They don't want time for reflection. That's why
you have to make a decision now type thing.
Yeah,
like
well, that's
high pressure sales.
That's why psychopathic cult leaders always have a catastrophe that they're predicting will happen in the not too distant future. It'll always be a couple of years away. And you must join my cult and you must get into my program because you've only got 2 years left. 2 years left before the end of the world. Quick. It's the exact same thing in a relationship. Oh, well, you say you love me, but, do you really love me? If you really love me and let me have that $10,000 so I could start the business, if you really love me. Oh, come on, it's easy to say you love me, but if you really, really love me, you'd let me move in with you and live in your house. Quick.
You wouldn't have to think about it. Prove your love.
yeah, and also and then I'll say things like, well, there's another woman I know over in California and she's got a swimming pool and, I don't really love her. She's not the one I really love. You are, but, I've also got my life to consider. Quick. A lot of that kind of thing going on. Big time confusing stuff. Get with the program now. You see these TV, like when I go to the United States and I watch those awful TV evangelist programs. Everything is like, get them in now, get the money in now before the end of the show. That way we can save souls for Jesus. Quick. That's what they do. They speed things along at incredible speed so you can't think straight.
Okay. All right. And then so I guess somewhere around or maybe during that, ostracization is another technique they use, right? They want to take over your communications, choose your friends, or maybe even keep you away from them entirely.
Oh yeah, that's what they'll mainly do, and they'll do that through. They'll weed you away from your traditional social network. That's why they'll often try and get you to move to another state or another country, or to get you away from your family, your friends, and your traditional, social network that you built up over your life. They do not want you with those people. They want you completely dependent upon them. They will be the pathological satellite. You'll be the satellite at the center of a pathological solar system, and the star in the middle of that solar system will be the psychopath, and you'll be expected to orbit around them and face them all the time and not look at the rest of the world. And if you do, you must look at the rest of the world with suspicion.
And don't they start like little whisper campaigns while they're doing this? For instance, they'll smile to your face, but in the meantime, they'll be contacting your friends or family and, this person's not feeling well. Maybe she's mentally unstable, but don't worry, I'm taking care of her. And, basically drop little hints that will make their traditional network want to disappear. So by the time the victim finds out what's going on, it's too late because nobody's there anymore.
Yeah, that's called gaslighting. That's changing the sense of reality for the person and the world that they live in. Gaslighting is very commonly designed by psychopaths to make a sane person believe they're insane. And also they'll do it to their social network as well. They'll do the same thing, like they'll try and imply that any kind of, especially when the target begins to question the psychopath will impose or invoke that the target is mentally ill or the target is not thinking straight. And then that will also be passed on to family members indirectly or friends, saying things like, "Oh, I don't know about him. He's going through a rough time. He seems to be having a nervous breakdown or a midlife crisis." When the guy could be perfectly normal. The accusations of mental illness that the psychopath throws around about the target, especially when they've left them or it's towards the end of the relationship, is generally done to confuse the person so they can't think straight or defend themselves. Now, a common tactic with cults is when someone leaves the cult leader will tell the rest of the cult that the person was mentally insane for not staying with us. This has two purposes. As well as saying that, this cult leader will also train the cult members to harass and attack the person who left the cult. The purpose of this is twofold. One, to consolidate the sense of us and them within the cult, but also to remind ones who may be thinking of leaving that they'll be next, that they'll get the same treatment, so to keep them imprisoned through fear, afraid to leave. Now, the second thing is you were saying about why do people tend to believe the smear campaigns of the psychopath? They really don't. That's not true at all. That's a perception thing. That's something that the target starts to believe themselves after a while. In reality, the person that's hearing these things doesn't really care that much, and the target thinks that the people that are being told these things about them care an awful lot more than they do. They don't. It's a perception. It's a mind game the psychopath plays to make you believe that everyone else is against you. It doesn't work like that at all. The psychopath is a phony, a fraud, an imposter, and it's putting these phony, fraudulent, imposter ideas into your head. Generally, it's not as bad as people think it is. They cultivate a kind of a paranoia, but when you really get down to it, it's not so bad.
Okay, yeah, I understand how that works, but at the same time, when they use their cult or their groupies to also attack and slander you and contact your family and friends and this and that, it actually kind of does become a reality. So my question is, what really blows my mind is, why are they so effective at getting people to believe their lies? I mean, why is it one person can say, oh, this person is, mentally ill, and then everyone believes it, it seems like, but the victim who's, trying to tell the truth about what's going on is completely dismissed?
Because the ability to control the human mind, especially a psychopath, is just staggering. Most people are very easily controlled if you can play on their insecurities and fears. You can get them to do anything. I mean, look at Hitler. He had, young German people believing, throwing Jewish people into ovens. This is literally what you can do.
And Italians and Polacks.
Exactly. I mean, the first thing they did when they invaded Poland was that they shot all the Boys and Girl Scouts because they knew they'd be the future leaders. You think to yourself, what kind of mind would do that? There were other 16 and 17-year-olds who were murdering these teenagers because they were so programmed. People, look, the reality is, Christie, that most people on this earth, and I'm not saying this in a snob way, but most people on this earth are terrified to think for themselves. And they will do the most incredible things and follow the most horrific and psychopathic orders and go to extreme lengths in order not to show any kind of individuality or think for themselves. And that's
so if the cool crowd or the crowd that's glittering says something, but the victim might be damaged or injured, it's just not so shiny anymore. So perhaps that has something to do with why they're so effective and, so far-reaching with their ability to victimize people?
Yeah, but it's also an element of it's fun for them too. They enjoy it. They love the power trip. They get a rush from it. See, psychopaths don't get fun from love or anything like that. What they do get it from is power trips.
Yeah, the effectiveness in being able to, hurt someone's reputation and such, obviously, yeah, they get a power trip out of it. But why does it seem that the masses are so easily programmable by that? And, to really, we can stretch this obviously beyond an individual. Some people are asking, well, what about leaders and, different groups? They mentioned the Masons and such. How do they gain so much control that it's almost like they wave a magic wand and anything they say goes?
Well, it is a kind of a magic. It is a kind of a spell. It is a kind of a magic. That's exactly what it is. Mm-hmm. Mass hunts, mass hysteria and witch hunts that we've had over the centuries, they've happened because of playing on the insecurities of a certain group and then saying to them that all the problems in your life are not caused by the political system, they're not caused by the religious system that you live under. They're caused by those strangers across the other side of town. And that's a very powerful trick that's been played on us. It mainly comes out of religion. Maybe comes out of the Bible especially the Old Testament, which actually consolidates the idea of us and them. That's why, the Cathars, who were an amazing heretical sect that lived in France in the 11th century, they actually believed that the Old Testament was written by a psychopathic demon named Jehovah, pretending to be God, because it was such a book that caused so much decisive hatred between people. And of course, they were all wiped out by the Vatican in the 11th century for saying that. Millions of them, by the way. And so there's this idea of we need a scapegoat very much comes out of the old religious ideas that there's us and them. And that's a very powerful thing they've capitalized on. If you have a problem in your life, it's not because of us, your leaders. It's because those guys on the other side of the town were a different religion. And that's now been extended onto a global phase. People want to feel that their members, they're on the side of the winning team. This goes back to everything from the brand of cheeseburger I eat is the best cheeseburger, right through the brand of religion and the brand of God I support is the best God. And the psychopath knows this about us. They know that we want the peer pressure and this need to be bonded with our peers. As they know, is very powerful because this sense of bonding, especially in a group, fires up hormones like oxytocin, which, this encourages the bonding. It encourages the loyalty. And people want that. That's how most people have been trained to be pack animals who can't think for themselves. And the psychopath is the one individual who could sit there like the band leader, like the orchestra conductor, who sits among this sort of this mess of peer pressure pathology and runs it like the puppet master.
Yeah, definitely. Very well said. Now, someone's asking, let's see, I'm going to try to get to these questions. Here's one. So my question is, when you label people as a psychopath, that's an individual, however, when it's done as a group, like Masons, in order to keep controlling others, what do you call it?
Well, that's a good question. The Freemasons, yeah, they're full of any groups like that, they're full of psychopaths because it gives them power. See, psychopaths don't really have talents except to manipulate people. That's why they're big into cults. So I consider the Freemasons a cult. Just, remember, they're a gang, just like the Mafia are a cult, just like the Mafia are Freemasons and the Cosa Nostra. The same idea, these types joined them. I would just call them a bunch of thugs. That's what I would just call them. Behind all the regalia and all their pageants and all their rituals, you're just dealing with a bunch of thugs at the end of the day. There's no difference between a bunch of a Freemasonic lodge filled with men of honor, as they call themselves, and a Chicago street gang that deals in crack and heroin and prostitutes. It's the same thing. It's just the same. It's just a thug taken to a polished level. That's all that is.
Yeah, so if you have guns and badges and money, it's all okay. It's just those little poor people over there that are crazy.
Oh yeah, if you have nice shiny uniforms and a nice lodge house, you're not in a gang.
Of course. Okay, so one more question I think we have time for. What do you do if you realize you were raised by a psychopath or one who acts like a psychopath?
Well, firstly, you don't have to be like them. The sins of the father are not visited upon the son. The sins of the mother are not visited upon the son. That's more religious BS programming we've been given. You are a sovereign, independent, free person, and your will and your free will is intrinsic to you, and you go and live your life the way you want to live, and do not feel you have to emulate, be a victim, or be polluted by that consciousness that gave rise to you. You are a sovereign, free human being living on a free universe, and your job is to develop and cultivate your own individual consciousness, so do not worry about it.
Very well said, Thomas. I appreciate that, and I appreciate you and your work very, very much. Thank you so much for sharing your time and wisdom with us here tonight, and thank you all for joining us here tonight. Blessings and love to you all, and we will see you tomorrow night.